After months of grueling meetings, architectural planning, permits, and inspections, my company finally completed Phase 2 of the Whispering Pines Lake development, a luxury cabin community nestled beside the sapphire blue waters of Crystal Ridge Lake. The final unit had closed last week. The dirt from the last landscaping truck hadn't even settled. I should have been celebrating. But instead, I was standing in the middle of the gravel driveway, arms crossed, staring at a woman in a sun visor furiously punching numbers into her phone. "I told you, you can't park there," she hissed, shielding her phone from the sun. "This is private property. I'm calling the HOA and the police." It took me a second to realize she was serious. That private property was the easement in front of my own lake cabin, the one I had designed, financed, and literally built with my crew. Every nail in its frame, every plank of cedar siding had passed through my hands or the hands of someone I hired. And that gravel driveway? I laid it myself with a bobcat and 2 summer interns during a record-breaking heat wave last July. Yet here she was, Karen, as the neighborhood kids not-so-secretly called her, treating me like a trespasser. "Ma'am," I said, carefully keeping my tone neutral, "this is my cabin." Karen didn't even glance up. "Yeah, and I'm the Queen of England. Look, I don't care who you say you are. This is a private neighborhood. The HOA rules clearly state that guests must use the designated visitor lot by the mailboxes. No exceptions." I gestured toward my truck. "There's no HOA sticker because I built the place. I developed the entire community. Technically, I wrote the HOA rules." She paused. Her sunglasses slid down her nose a fraction. "You what?" "I'm the developer. Whispering Pines, LLC. Ring any bells?" Karen blinked, the gears in her head visibly grinding. She glanced at my truck, matte black F-150 with construction decals still faintly visible on the side. Then back at me. Her expression shifted from disbelief to a mixture of confusion and simmering suspicion. "No, that can't be right. Brad said the developer lives in Los Angeles." "I do. Sometimes. I split time between here and L.A., and Brad, my sales rep." Karen's jaw clenched. "Well, even if that's true, you're still required to notify the HOA board if you're staying overnight. That's in Section 4B of the handbook." I couldn't help it. I laughed. "I wrote Section 4B. It applies to renters, not owners. Especially not to me." She didn't like that answer. Karen ended her 911 call abruptly, muttering something about handling it internally. Then she stormed back toward her porch, her toy poodle barking furiously at my ankles the whole way. I sighed and turned back toward the cabin. The sun was starting to dip behind the pines, casting long shadows across the still lake. What should have been a quiet night, sipping bourbon by the fire, had already started with verbal joust. I hadn't even unloaded my fishing gear. 10 minutes later, I was halfway through unpacking when I heard footsteps crunching on gravel. Turning around, I saw 3 more people standing at the edge of my lot. 2 men and a woman, all holding clipboards like they were about to conduct a census. One of the men, tall with salt and pepper hair and a Bluetooth headset tucked behind his ear, gave me a diplomatic smile. "Hi there. You must be the guest Karen called about." "Guess?" I echoed. "I live here." The trio exchanged glances. "Technically," said the woman, flipping through her papers, "we don't have you registered as a resident. You're not on the current list of homeowners provided by the HOA. That's because the title was just finalized. I haven't even had time to add myself to the directory." "Well," said the Bluetooth guy, "until that's cleared up, we're going to have to ask you to move your vehicle." I stared at them for a moment, then reached into my back pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened an app. A few swipes later, I had the original plot maps and development deeds on screen, my name sign on every page. "This is my land," I said, turning the screen toward them. "All of it was mine before I sold it to any of you. This driveway, this lot, this entire street, it was a forest before I came along." For a moment, no one spoke. Then the second man, younger and red-faced, mumbled, "Well, that's not really the point. The point is, we have a system, and systems exist for a reason." "Sure," I replied, But when the system forgets the architect who built it, maybe it's time to review who's in charge. There was a beat of silence. Then Bluetooth guy cleared his throat and said, "We'll be contacting the board about this." As they turned to leave, I couldn't help but chuckle. The thing they didn't realize, I was still technically the board president. I hadn't officially stepped down yet, but that was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up to find a warning notice taped to my door. The notice was printed in bold red letters. Immediate violation notice. Unauthorized parking, non-registered occupancy, suspicious activity, HOA review pending. At first, I laughed it off. Another passive-aggressive stunt from Karen and her clipboard army. I figured. But then I noticed something strange. The date on the notice was 3 days in the future. July 8th. Today was only July 5th. I checked my phone to be sure. Still July 5th. But the notice was dated July 8th and signed by HOA Compliance Officer, Eleanor Blackwood. I had never hired a compliance officer by that name. That's when I started to feel the first shiver of unease. The cabin had always been quiet, built for peace and isolation, but now the silence pressed against the windows like it was alive. Even the lake outside seemed still, too still, as though it were holding its breath. No wind, no birds, just a distant, irregular tick-tick-tick of the motion sensor light above my porch flickering on and off, even though nothing moved out there. That night, I tried to sleep. At exactly 3:13 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps on the porch. Slow, heavy, deliberate. At first, I assumed it was Karen. Again, maybe dropping off another one of her little paper threats. But when I peered through the peephole, no one was there. I waited, and then I heard it, scratching, not on the door, but under the cabin, like something dragging long fingernails across the wooden supports. I grabbed a flashlight, pulled on a jacket, and stepped out back, careful not to make noise. But the motion light didn't come on this time. Just darkness. The kind that feels like it's watching you back. When I crouched near the crawl space, the scratching had stopped. But there, just barely visible in the dirt, were tracks. Bare human footprints. Small like a child's, but with 6 toes. That's when the floodlights over Karen's cabin turned on behind me. Her voice rang out across the still lake. "I warned you," she said from her second-story balcony, her voice tight with fear. "You woke it up." Before I could respond, her lights cut out. All of them. Her cabin went black. Silence again. Then screaming. Not from her. From inside her cabin. A high, echoing wail that didn't sound human. It was as if 100 voices were trying to scream through one throat. I bolted across the lawn, but when I reached her front door, it was wide open. Her poodle stood at the threshold, shaking, staring into the dark hallway beyond. I called her name. No answer. Karen was gone. In her living room. I found a single page torn from the same HOA handbook she had been waving in my face the day before. Someone, maybe her, had circled one clause in black marker. Section 7F. Under no circumstances shall residents disturb the foundations after sunset. Do not dig. Do not build. Do not look beneath. There was no Section 7F in the version I wrote. I left her cabin and called the sheriff. A deputy came out, looked around, took my statement, said Karen probably left for the weekend. People like that disappear for attention, he said. But the poodle was still there. So was her car. And the footprint, the 6-toed one, now appeared just outside her kitchen window. The next morning, another notice was taped to my door. Same red lettering. Same IRICOM. Second warning, non-compliance with Section 7F. Further disturbances will not be tolerated. Signed, Eleanor Blackwood, HOA Enforcement Division. I looked up the name again. No records, no license, no employee files. But buried in a dusty PDF in the county archives was a mention of her. Eleanor Blackwood, last surviving resident of Crystal Ridge Township, a lakeside village built in the 1800s where the Whispering Pines development now sits. The town was abandoned after a series of unexplained sinkholes and disappearances. Sinkholes that never made the modern geological maps. Disappearances that were never solved. My cabin, our entire development, had been built directly over the ruins of that lost town, and it seemed something underneath was beginning to stir. By the third day, people were whispering about Karen, about her cabin, and about the sound that came from it the night she disappeared. It wasn't just me who heard it. Half a dozen other homeowners claimed they woke up at 3:13 a.m., same time I did, with a pressure in their ears, a deep ringing, like they were standing beneath power lines or underwater. No one wanted to say the word paranormal, but it hung in the air like lake mist. Karen's house remained dark. Her poodle refused to leave my porch and wouldn't go near her place. It just lay there, whimpering at night, tail between its legs, always staring in the direction of the woods that border the edge of the neighborhood, the woods where we never finished Phase 3 of the development. There were reasons for that. Back when we were surveying the land, several crew members walked off the job, said the compasses stopped working near the trees. One guy, a longtime contractor from Tennessee, went white as a sheet and refused to ever come back. He claimed he saw something standing between the trees. Wasn't human, he whispered. Wasn't animal either. We laughed back then. Called it heat stroke. Now I'm not so sure. That night, I stayed up. I had a gut feeling. I knew 3:13 was coming again, and I didn't want to be caught off guard. I brewed coffee, loaded a flashlight with fresh batteries, kept a pen and notebook next to me, ready to document whatever happened. Not that I expected to need it. Part of me still believed this was all a twisted coincidence. At 3:13 a.m., the power went out. All at once, the coffee machine clicked off. The porch light died. My phone shut down, not just the screen, but the whole device, like the battery had been sucked dry in an instant. And then footsteps. Again, only this time, they weren't on the porch. They were inside the house, creaking across the hardwood. Slow, measured. I froze. The flashlight flickered weakly as I raised it. Shadows danced across the beams overhead, distorting everything into a warped funhouse version of my own cabin. The air turned cold, a wet, earthy cold, like the kind you feel inside a damp cave. And then I saw it, a figure, not quite solid, not quite smoke, standing at the end of the hallway where the blueprints closet used to be, the one I had locked ever since the night I moved in. It was tall, wrong-shaped. Its arms looked too long. Its head tilted slightly as though it was listening. But worst of all was a smile, not drawn in flesh, but carved in glowing lines, like embers etched into air. It didn't move, just stared, and then it was gone, just like that. But in its place, the closet door was open. It hadn't been unlocked in over a year. I crept forward and shined my light inside. The closet was empty, no files, no shelves, nothing, except for a small, folded piece of paper lying on the floor. I picked it up. The handwriting was old, faded, like it had been written with a quill or fountain pen. Beneath the lake lies the town we buried. They warned us not to build over it. We didn't listen, and now she wakes. Signed, Eleanor Blackwood, August 12, 1891. My hand trembled. I sat down, tried to process what I had just read, but before I could even breathe, my porch creaked again. I rushed to the front door and found another notice tape there. This time it was different. The paper was wet, old, mildewed at the corners, like it had been sitting at the bottom of a well for 100 years. But the message was clear. Final warning. You brought them here. You opened the foundation. We are watching. Do not leave. There was no signature. No HOA letterhead. Just a faint watermark in the corner. A sigil I didn't recognize. A circle of pine trees, surrounding an I made of black flame. The HOA board met that morning in the clubhouse. What was left of them. Anyway, 2 members didn't show. 1 resigned on the spot. That left only me, Brad the salesman, and a retired dentist named Harold. Brad looked pale. I checked the HOA ledger, he whispered, showing me his tablet. There's no record of Eleanor Blackwood anywhere. Not now. Not in any file. But someone's been adding new sections to the digital handbook. Automatically. Adding? I asked. When? Always at 3:13 a.m. Every night. Like the system's being rewritten. Harold chimed in quietly. I went to check my lot lines yesterday. You know how my cabin backs right up to the lake. I nodded. He leaned closer. The shoreline moved. What do you mean? I mean it's closer, like the land sank, but the water didn't rise. We were silent for a long time, and then Brad said it. What if the HOA isn't in charge anymore? The next night, more cabins went dark. A new family, just moved in from out of state, was found sleeping in their car at the base of the hill, refusing to go back to their house. Said they saw something walking through their kitchen in the reflection of their microwave door. It wasn't them. It wasn't human. Want to keep going? In the next part, I can introduce the lost town beneath the lake, the drowned chapel that resurfaces only during the blood moon, and a secret journal that reveals what Eleanor Blackwood tried to warn everyone about that evening. Just as the sun slipped behind the ridgeline, I took the old folded letter from Eleanor Blackwood and headed the edge of the lake. It was quiet again, too quiet. The wind didn't stir the pines. The water sat like black glass, perfectly still, perfectly wrong. I could feel something in the air, a buzzing, like the static of an old TV before a storm. Brad had bailed earlier that morning, left a voicemail that just said, "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have signed those permits. I think I let them in." Harold had gone off the grid too. That left me, the founder, the builder, the one who laid the first foundation, and the one they were now watching. I stood on the shoreline where Harold said the land had started sinking. I noticed something I hadn't seen before, a row of stones beneath the shallows, just barely visible now that the lake had retreated a few feet. Not natural stones. Brick. It was a road, a cobbled one, leading out into the lake. I stepped onto it. Every step echoed, even underwater, like the sound was bouncing off something far below. The air around me seemed to hum louder the farther I went. And then I saw it. Not a full structure, but a steeple, its tip barely piercing the lake surface, covered in moss, weathered by time, and hanging from the top, swaying gently though there was no wind, was a rusted iron bell, a church bell, Eleanor Blackwood's journal, which I found hidden behind a wall of my own fireplace that morning, said this was the last building standing before the town below had been sealed. Sealed not by flood, but by intention. The founders of Crystal Ridge made a deal. Eleanor had written, when the forest was cleared, something was unearthed, a thing with eyes like mirrors and a voice like echoing water. They promised it quiet. In return, it promised to sleep. But when the earth is disturbed, it remembers. And when the bell rings, it wakes. I stood there staring at it. And then the wind finally came. Not a breeze. A sudden gust, spiraling out from the center of the lake like a breath from something massive. The water churned. The steeple creaked, and the iron bell, bong. The sound rolled through the entire valley. The trees bent as if ducking from it. All the cabin lights flickered, and then I heard them, voices, not shouting, singing, a chorus of long-forgotten hymns rising from the lake itself. Hundreds of them, like an old-town church choir that had never stopped singing, even after the pews had crumbled and the earth swallowed their sanctuary. I turned to run, heart racing, breath foggy in the cold air, when I saw Karen, standing at the tree lean, soaking wet, staring. Her mouth moved silently, but her voice wasn't hers anymore. It sounded layered, echoed, like wind rushing through a tunnel, like many voices using one throat. She raised a finger and pointed at my cabin. I didn't wait. I sprinted back up the hill, across the gravel drive, past the motion sensor lights that now refused to turn on, and burst in my front door, just as my phone powered back up for the first time in days. One notification. From the HOA app. New notice added. Section 8 begins. I opened it. There, in plain text. Section 8A. The builder must return what was taken. The bell must not toll again. The lake will rise. My phone went dark again. And outside, behind me, the cabin began to shake. Not violently, gently, like something was shifting beneath it, like a massive breath rising from the deep earth below. And then the voice returned, whispering just above the floorboards. You built over our sleep. I dropped the phone. Suddenly, the closet, the same one where I found Eleanor's note, creaked open on its own. Inside, carved into the wood, was a single phrase, "Only the builder can seal it again." I didn't know what that meant. Not yet. But I knew this. It wasn't just about one angry HOA Karen. It wasn't about rules or violations or even forgotten towns. It was about what lay beneath, and the promise that had been broken, the deal. And now I had to fix it, because the lake was rising, and whatever was sleeping down there, it was waking up.